So we are live on YouTube. Uh, Hello everyone, good evening to all the history enthusiasts. Welcome you all once again to the international webinar on rewriting her story. Today is the fifth day and this is the first session of today. And the theme of today's entire day will be women and health. And we have a very interesting lecture on the ancient science behind menstrual practices. Our resource person for today is Ma'am Sinu Joseph G, uh, menstrual educator, author, and managing trustee, Maitri Speaks Trust, Karnataka. On behalf of me and Nidhi and my entire team, I welcome you, ma'am, to this session and to our platform. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Namaste. Thank you so much for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Yes. I also welcome our honorary president, Sri Nandan Shastri ji, who has joined us here today from Ahmedabad, and all our participants who have joined and who will be joining soon. And I also welcome my my dear friend and the vice president of the history enthusiast, Ms. Nidhi Katti. With this few words of welcome, I now request Ms. Nidhi Katti to introduce our today's resource person.
Thank you, Monali. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to introduce our today's resource person, Sinu Joseph, ma'am. It's an honor to introduce, ma'am. Just give me a minute. Am I clearly audible? Manali, am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Uh, Sinu Joseph is an author who has worked at the grassroots with women and adolescents for over a decade through various social organizations. She is the co-founder and managing trustee of Maitri Speaks Trust. She has done extensive action research in the areas of menstrual and reproductive health since 2009 and traveled across rural India, interacting with thousands of adolescent girls and women directly to get a first hand experience of menstrual practices and their impact on women's health. Stepping aside from the popular narratives which focus on menstrual products, her work has explored native methods, cultural practices around menstruation, and the science behind it. She has written extensively on unearthing the science behind native practices and bringing forth a unique narrative, which is the Bharatiya perspective on menstruation. Her first book, Women and Shabrimala, was the first of its kind that provided answers to the question why women should not enter Shabrimala by exploring the science behind the restrictions. This book explored a never before perspective on the science behind temples, especially mokshadhamas, and how it affects the reproductive health of women. This book was a bestseller in the category of Hinduism for a long periods of time. Her second book, Ritu Vidya, emerged in search of answers to the questions asked by young girls regarding the cultural practices around menstruation. In this book, ma'am decodes the science behind the menstrual practices through the lens of Ayurveda, Shaddarshana, Tantra, Chakra, Yoga, Agama Shastra, Jyotishya Shastra, and several subtexts from these categories, while connecting them to quantum biology and modern medicine to ease the reader's understanding. Ritu Vidya has helped thousands of women find relief from menstrual problems, and it is also used by gynecologists to advise their patients on preventing menstrual problems. She's currently working on her next two books, which will be an exploration and explanation of the science behind specific rules in the Shastra. Uh, I warmly welcome you again, ma'am, to this session. We are blessed to have you in this session, and I feel that you are the perfect person on this sub theme, women and health, to talk today. Now I request Sinu Joseph, ma'am, to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nidhi, for the kind introduction. So I believe we have about 45 minutes, right? Okay. So I will straight away jump into the core of the subject so that we don't lose any time. So whatever I'm going to say today is just a glimpse of whatever has been covered in much greater detail in the book Rutu Vidya, which I have on my panel to my right. So what I'm not able to cover in this talk, those who are interested can study Rutu Vidya for more detailed answers on whatever I'm touching upon. So the subject is to do with understanding some of the traditional rules around menstruation practiced by women in India even today. So common rules: when you have your period, don't eat anything spicy, don't have too much non-vegetarian food, don't over-exercise during your period, take rest, don't take bath, that is, don't wash your hair during your period, avoid going to the temple, doing the puja. All of these are rules which many women in India follow, right? And yet, when we don't understand the reasons for it, we think this is just superstition. But the truth is that all of these rules have a deep science. To understand that science, we must know our native knowledge systems. That is Ayurveda, Tantra, chakras, similar such systems. It's important to know this because that will be the language with which we can decode these practices. So in today's lecture, I will just give a glimpse of how we can decode some of these practices through the language of Ayurveda. The most common practice, which we've all heard, is to not touch the tulsi plant during menstruation, isn't it? During one of my sessions in a village in Karnataka, this was in Ballari, village was in Sandur district. When I was talking about the different practices, some of the women told me that in their village, when a girl gets her first period, they gift her a plant. And they ask her to water that plant and look after the plant all through her menstrual cycle. At the end of her period, they observe the plant. After a few days and weeks, if the plant has survived, then the rule of not touching tulsi does not apply to this girl. If the plant has not survived, then this girl should follow the rule that henceforth during her period, she should not touch the plant. To me, this was a wonderful insight into how our women actually experiment and find out precisely which rule applies to which girl. And the reason for this has to do with our inherent prakriti. So as per Ayurveda, each person has a very specific body constitution. We call this prakriti. And as per Ayurveda, all that we see externally manifest is the work of the three biological forces called Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Vata is the force that manages all movements within the body, including the movement of blood, the movement of hormones, the downward movement of the baby during birthing. All of this is handled by Vata dosh. Pitta is the force of Agni, of fire, and it's responsible for all the metabolic processes in the body. So what we say as internal heat, that is basically Pitta. It is different from allopathy's idea of temperature. This is heat, internal heat. And the third force is Kapha, Kapha dosha. Kapha is that binding sticky fluid that keeps together the cell structures and provides the fluid base for things, including menstruation. So based on our prakriti, we may be having dominant Vata dosh, dominant Pitta dosh, or dominant Kapha dosh, or a combination of these. If you are the kind who has a dominant Pitta dosh, your internal body heat will be high. But if you are of a Kapha prakriti, even though Pitta rises during your period, it will balance out because of Kapha, and you may not have the same impact on the plant. So that is what the women were testing when they would make the girl take care of the plant and then observe the plant for days and weeks together. Personally, I have known so many women who have actually seen this happen, that the tulsi just does not grow in their balcony. That's mainly because they would be of the pitta prakriti, and that internal pittam or internal heat gets further aggravated when they have their period. So this is just one of the rules to give an idea. Even to understand something so simple, we have to know so many details, isn't it? So it is not possible to decode something without a deeper understanding of Ayurveda. So now we will just go a step further and dig deeper to know, how does Ayurveda understand menstruation itself? According to the ancient Czech texts, Charaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita, it is not normal to have period pain. It may have become common, maybe majority of us are experiencing it, but it is not normal. Period pain and all the symptoms associated with it, the emotional symptoms, the PMS symptoms, the physical symptoms, all of that actually are indicators of one of these three doshas being out of balance. So if you know how to decode these indicators, you will know inherently what is the pitta, vata or kapha imbalance in your body, and then you can take measures to fix it. That is why in villages, women consider menstruation as a big blessing, because they know how to read these signs. They know what it means if you have stomachache. They know what it means if you get angry just before your period. They know what it means if you feel very nervous, very restless. They know what it means if you feel depressed during your period. And all of these different signs are not put into a single common bracket. Each of these are due to the result of either vata or pitta or kapha prakopa, or a combination of this. So that's what we will now understand. So if someone has an inherent vata dominant prakriti, so vata has the qualities of vayu and akasha. Picture vayu as the wind, as air. So all the qualities of the air, it's always in moving, always in movement, right? So those qualities of the vayu tattva will be inherent in the person. And such a person, when they menstruate, the flow will be quite scanty. It may be just between 2 to 3 days, very light flow. It won't be sticky. It will be a very dryish texture of the blood. And the color of the blood will be dark brownish. And if the person has had aggravation of vata before their period, for example, if you do excessive physical exercise just before or during your period, vata controls all movements. So physical exercise and the entire skeletal system is governed by vata. So when you menstruate, vata is high, which means your overall skeletal system is very delicate. And the chances of having bone injuries is very high during such times. That is why they say do not exercise when you menstruate or the day just before your period, because vata is high, consequently bone density is lesser and chances of injury is much more. So for whatever reason, a person has exercised excessively before their period, and we see this among sports women. Consequently, that month, their period will have the qualities of vata dosh. Vata prakopa. Prakopa means aggravation. That means it will be a very light flow, dark brown in color, and emotionally, they will feel very nervous, very restless, very anxious. These are all the guna of vata prakopa. And these are the people who will usually tend to have constipation, gastric problems, and because of that, the experience of cramps when they menstruate. So many of the rules pertaining to don't exercise too much during your period, avoid food which is very difficult to digest, food which is cold, all of that is to prevent aggravation of vata dosha. Okay, so that's the first type. The second type, if you have a naturally pitta dominant prakriti, that means the quality of agni, of fire, is naturally dominant in you. then your menstrual blood will be a bright red in color. Remember, for Vata, it was a dark brownish or a coffee brownish color blood. For Pitta, it is a bright red color blood. Flow is little bit more than usual. So it could be anywhere between 4 to 6 days of a period, 4 to 6 days of menstruation. And this is when the bleeding, if Pitta is very high, it will be a very hot and heavy period. So heavy menstrual bleeding is very often associated with an aggravated Pitta dosha, Pitta prakopa. What aggravates Pitta? Hot and spicy food, non-vegetarian food. All of these increase the heat in the body, internal heat, and that directly translates into heavy bleeding. And sour foods, curd, pickle, even fruits which are citrus fruits which are sour, all sour things increase Pitta dosha, and consequently the bleeding will be more. If you go to the villages, the grandmothers will say, if some girl has said, Aji, I had a heavy period this month, the first thing is, did you have curd when you had your period? That's what they will ask, because they know the connection. If you eat fish during your period, anything which increases Pitta will result in heavier bleeding, which may even be having a metallic odor because of the heavy blood flow. Emotionally, when Pitta is aggravated, that is when PMS time comes with these hunger pangs. You want to eat junk food. You want to eat oily things. You want to eat chocolate. All that is because Pitta is rising just before the period. And associated with this is the quality of short temper, of feeling angry. Many girls get to know their period is starting because one day before they will have a big fight with someone. And for them, that is an indication that tomorrow period will start. You should not have to do that. If you know these signs in advance and you can do things to keep Pitta in check. That means 1 week before your period, avoid oily food. Avoid anything that increases body heat. Avoid non-vegetarian food. If you can't do it the whole month, at least do it 1 week before and during your period. Avoid caffeine. Avoid carbonated soda-based drinks. All these increase Pitta. So when you take care of these things and do basic yoga, not during your period, but before it, you will see that all your PMS symptoms will very naturally dissolve. Because if your doshas are in balance, what yoga does is it regulates the doshas. If the doshas are in balance, you will not experience problems during your period. Okay. Otherwise, if you have a Pitta Prakriti and you've done things to further aggravate Pitta, your period will be heavy. Emotionally, you will be angry. You will feel exhausted because you're losing so much blood. So all these signs will be associated. The third type has to do with Kapha. Kapha Prakriti. Generally, women of Kapha Prakriti are more fertile. So physically, they will be a little more shorter, a little more well-built, stout. So they have very good stamina, very good endurance. So women who get into weightlifting or wrestling, if you see their body type, it's a Kapha dominant Prakriti. They are very strong, very fertile by nature. And in such cases, however, the tendency for them is to eat a lot of junk food. They have a natural craving for food. So if they eat too much of unhealthy food, eat food that is very stale, frozen food, eat excessive non-veg, then there will be Kapha Prakopa. And if that happens, the menstrual blood will be lighter in color. It won't be dark brown like Vata Prakopa. It won't be bright red like Pitta. It will be lighter, like a light pink almost. And this is the case where there will be more clots in the blood. White discharge associated issues are more when there is Kapha Prakopa. And emotionally, women who have Kapha problems are the ones who will feel depressed during menstruation. So Vata makes people nervous and restless. Pitta makes them angry. Kapha makes them feel very lethargic and depressed and lazy. They'll just want to sleep through the whole period, which is very wrong. You must not sleep during the day when you have your period. But that is how they will feel. So Kapha women will greatly benefit by doing exercises before their period. So of all the three prakritis, the strongest physical body is of the kapha type. So they can jog, they can run, they can go to the gym, it's fine. But pitta and vata people might benefit more by doing yoga rather than the typical gym-based exercises. Yeah. So these are the three types of prakriti. And almost all the rules in, traditionally, which our grandmothers follow, have to do with preventing the prakopa, the aggravation of either vata or pitta or kapha. Now, the common practice of taking bath, right? Not taking bath, rather. So, according to Ayurveda, you must not come in contact with water during your period. Now, some of you, if you have tried this, you will observe if you stand under water during your period, that is, if water is falling on your head, or if you are in a swimming pool, your period will stop. As long as water is falling on your head, there will be no blood flow. When you come out, the blood flow will restart. This is because of two things. One, during menstruation, you have to maintain a certain body temperature internally. Pitta and vata are a little bit high, and they need to be high for menstruation to occur. When you pour water on the body, you alter that process. The second thing is more subtle. Water has the ability to turn prana upwards. Prana is the life force that runs through your nadis, all through your body. When someone is born, why are they born? Because prana has entered the jiva. And what is death? When prana leaves, there is death. Okay, so prana is the thing on which blood flow, oxygen, hormones, everything is resting on the flow of prana. When we menstruate, one of the types of prana called apana vayu, it is equivalent to the body's gravitational force. This apana vayu flows downwards and outwards. It operates in your reproductive region and flows downwards. So just as we have gravity outside, which keeps things moving down, within the body, it is the apana vayu, which is the gravity, that keeps blood flow, urine, stools, everything going down. If apana is blocked, or if its direction changes, then all the functions governed by apana vayu will be affected. So those who are struggling to have a normal delivery, it's because apana vayu is blocked or its direction has turned. Endometriosis is a classic case of apana vayu having inversed and carrying the menstrual blood with it to the upward parts of the body. That's why you mustn't do inversions or anything which puts your body against gravity during menstruation. That will turn apana vayu. When you pour water on your head, apana vayu is temporarily blocked because it's a form of prana, and water has the ability to turn prana upwards. When you are in a swimming pool or underwater, your body is against gravity and apana cannot flow down and out. And that is why this restriction exists that during menstruation, do not take bath, which basically means do not pour water on your head. Of course, our mothers and grandmothers, for hygiene reasons, could not accept that rule, so they modified it. So the modified practice is what we see, that on the first day of the period, they immediately tell you to run and go and have a head bath, because for the next 4 or 5 days, you must not pour water on the head. So the main days of bleeding, don't wash the hair. You can have a very light body bath, but the first day and the last day is when you pour water on the head. On all other days, it interferes with menstrual flow. You will not believe the number of women who have benefited from just this practice, especially if they have irregular menstruation. The flow is very scanty, it's not happening. It's an indication that there isn't enough pitta. There's more of vata, and that internal pitta is not being conserved. The minute they practice this thing of not taking bath, the flow regularizes. And many women have shared this as a direct experience. In the villages, women even say that it will affect your womb. If you take bath during your period, it will actually affect your reproductive ability because it's turning prana up when prana has to go down, right? So these are some of the rules and the reasons why it is there. Now I'll come to the most talked about practice of why menstruating women should not visit certain temples. Any temple, actually. A Hindu temple is a place where It's not a regular building, not even comparable to other places of worship like a church, a mosque, or a gurudwara, because here there is a specific science in building it called the Agama Shastra. So when we study Agama Shastra, we understand that there is a technique called Prana Pratishtha, by virtue of which the Archaka literally fills in prana into a sculpture, into a murti, and makes it a vigraham. So after prana pratishtha, that particular vigraham carries a certain chaitanyam, which is a vibration, a frequency of vibration. When we menstruate, prana, of the 5 types of prana, the lower prana, that is apana, is what is active. And it's active 24/7 all the days when you menstruate, right? Unlike when we urinate, apana is active. And then when we stop urinating, apana also stops its activity. But it's not like that with menstruation. If you're bleeding for 4 or 5 days, all 4 or 5 days, apana is on like a switch. It's continuously causing menstrual flow to go down and out. In such a situation, if you walk into a temple, temples will work on your sukshma sharira, that is your subtle body. In the subtle body, we have junctions called chakras. So I'm just going in and out because I'm conscious of the time. There will be space for you to ask questions if you haven't understood, but let me move in a slightly faster pace now. We can go slower when we have the FAQ section. Okay, so please bear with me. So when we say subtle body, this is the primary difference between allopathy and Ayurveda. So allopathy only understands the physical body, which you can experience with your senses. But Ayurveda understood that along with the physical body, there is a subtle body, which we call the Sukshma Sharira. So just as you have nerves and plexus points in the physical body, we have nadis and chakras in the Sukshma Sharira, which you can't see with your eyes, but you can experience them as vibrations. So nadis are very fine channels, thinner than a strand of hair, which carry prana all across the body. So the yoga texts say that there are more than 72,000 nadis running all over the body. And points in the body where several nadis meet and exchange prana, those points, those junctions are what we call chakras. So there are more than 100 chakras in the body, each of them influencing organs in their region of operation. But the primary chakras that we focus on in the Adhyatmic process are the 6 chakras aligned along the spinal cord. Each of these 6 chakras influence the endocrine glands associated with it. So if, for example, if there is ovarian dysfunction, the subtle body, we will know it much sooner than when it manifests as an ovarian dysfunction, because in the subtle body, those who can read it will know there is not enough prana going to the Swadhisthana chakra, which triggers the ovaries. That's how all problems actually begin in the subtle body, in the chakras. And when there is insufficient prana going there, it in turn affects the reproductive organs. So this is the Sukshma Sharira. Going back to temples. When the process of prana pratishtha is done in the temple, there is a certain chaitanyam there, which is basically a frequency of vibration. Based on the type of vibration, it corresponds to one or more chakras in the body, because the chakras also and corresponding organs too operate at a particular frequency of vibration. So if we go to temples of, say, for instance, Devi temples, where Devi is worshipped as the fertility goddess, there the Chaitanyam will have the frequency of your lower chakras, which correspond to your reproductive organs. So when you walk in there, you are like a tuning fork. If some of you remember an experiment from your physics lab days, there's a tuning fork, you bang it and then it starts vibrating. And then you bring another tuning fork near this one. The second tuning fork hasn't been banged. But because this one is vibrating and these two forks are similar, the two forks start vibrating in resonance. A similar phenomenon happens when we go to a Hindu temple. One of the chakras which correspond to the frequency of vibration in the temple will become active and starts vibrating. When it vibrates, there will be more prana channelized to that chakra. So if you are menstruating and you go to a temple which is known to improve your menstrual health, then you will bleed excessively. Because when you menstruate, already your lower chakras are active, it's already functioning, and then you further send prana to it, you further trigger it. So you'll end up bleeding more. I know the cases of so many women who visited temples during their period because they thought it's not going to affect them. And then the way the period happened, they bled continuously for months, some of them for up to 90 days. And there was no way they could reverse the process. They tried allopathy, homeopathy, Ayurveda, and the only option was to remove the uterus. That's why this rule is so important for us to understand. At the same time, if you visited a place that worked on the higher chakras, let's say a Mokshadam or any Shiva temple, all of these are intended to turn prana upwards. So instead of the prana going down during your period, it is forcibly turned upwards. And if that keeps happening, it will manifest as endometriosis, or it could manifest as early menopause because prana is not going down, it's only going up. And these are the reasons why women are told not to go to temples when they menstruate. Certain temples like Shabrimala, even if the woman is not menstruating at that time, these temples are mokshadhams, which means they straight away work on your higher chakras, Agnya and Sahasrara. Moksha means you should be able to consciously allow prana to be pulled up and leave your body from higher chakras. So in these temples, it will facilitate that process. Your prana's quality itself will change, that it will mostly be going up. So when you go to such places, your period becomes more and more difficult, also because these places will stimulate the Agnya chakra, which is where we apply the kumkum, right? And Agnya chakra is connected to your pituitary gland. When the pituitary gland is triggered, as you know, it releases the hormones LH and FSH. And it is out of that testosterone is made. Women need a very small amount of testosterone. But if you're only triggering Agnya chakra, it is producing more and more testosterone. And your ovaries, which should convert the testosterone into estrogen, is not able to move at that pace. Remember, frequency of vibration of Agnya is much higher than the frequency of vibration of Swadhisthana, your lower chakra. If you go to a place which is only working on this, there's more and more of testosterone produced, but your ovaries are not able to keep up in converting that into estrogen. Consequently, there's excess testosterone in the bloodstream, and that manifests as PCOD or male features and the like. When I wrote my book on Shabrimala and it got popular, one of the women who read it wrote back to me saying she was taken to Shabrimala before her menarche, before her first period, when she was around 8 or 9 years. And that, as per the rules, is allowed. But in that final moment, when they had the Makara Jyoti, she experienced something phenomenal all over her body. There was goosebumps. And she was so young, she couldn't describe what happened. After that, when she was around 13, her period started. It was a problematic period from the start. Gynecologist put her on some medicines, and then the period that started did not stop. It just went on for weeks together. And she said something very significant. She said, before this incident, I was very girly. I was very feminine. And after this, the changes that happened in me were so severe that I became more man-like. I started having more facial hair. My voice deepened. My body became more muscular. Basically, hormonally, an alteration had occurred. Because that's what happens when you powerfully trigger only the pituitary, but the ovary is not able to keep up. So this is how we need to understand. It's a very quick summary of a very, very vast topic. Those who wish to know it in detail, please read the books. Ritu Vidya is also available as an online course through the Center for Indic Studies. We have a channel for Ritu Vidya in Hindi because it's translated into Hindi. Those who prefer it in Hindi can listen to it in Hindi as well. So I will pause now so we can take questions. And I will try to go a little bit slower when it comes to answering the questions. Yeah.
There is a question in the. Thank you, ma'am, for the interesting lecture. There are a couple of questions in the chat box. One is from our honorary president, Shinandan Shastri ji. In Maryland, USA, there is a museum on menstruation and women's health. Sinu ji, don't you think that it is need of the hour to establish such a museum in Karnataka or anywhere in India?
Sure. It's not just a museum. The right understanding of it should also go. Menstruation. So what happens often is that we simply say that this is tradition and this is culture and we should respect. But actually, this is much more than history, much more than culture. This is science. This is the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara. And the efforts of museum or anything else will be successful when it goes hand in hand with recognizing our sciences, not as alternative medicine, but mainstream. In this country, shouldn't our native science be mainstream? And what came from outside should be alternative. But we don't do that. We call our own sciences as alternative. Until that shift happens, the real change, I think, will be quite far away. But all efforts towards it are definitely welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. I do have a question of my own. So, what you just said, all this about the Vata, Pitta, and the Kapha dosha, and the Ayurvedic aspect of it, this is all science. But many a times, what happens is this, in connection with some other things, is used against women. Of course, the knowledge of Ayurveda is not very common in India. Even though it originated in India, a lot of people do not have the knowledge of Ayurveda. And in the name of tradition, they create new and new rules every day, along with the rules which are already existing. There are people who say that women who cook for their husbands when they are menstruating will be born as a female dog in their next birth, or something like that. So, all these kinds of sayings come up regarding menstruation by men who do not know anything about Ayurveda or the or even about menstruation or what is the process. So, what is your answer to such people?
Don't worry about others. You try to understand the subject properly. So, women should not cook for others during menstruation. That is true. Do you know why?
No.
So, then you should first try to understand that. Because only when you know that can you separate fact from fiction. Otherwise, you will throw the baby out with the bathwater. So when we menstruate, the body has the tendency to go into oxidative stress. And there are several papers that show that in a woman's menstrual cycle, during ovulation as well as menstruation, the body goes into oxidative stress. During ovulation, estrogen is naturally high, and estrogen is an antioxidant. So it makes up for it. But during menstruation, estrogen is also at an all-time low. So your body, when you say it's losing its oxidative stress, means many of the atoms are turning into free radicals by losing electrons. When you are in such a state and anything you come in contact with, you tend to borrow electrons from it. This is called electron transfer, and it is a phenomenon understood in quantum biology, not in regular biology. So during the process of electron transfer, what happens is that particular individual or plant or fruit that you touch will in turn go into oxidative stress. In our language, we understand this as when we menstruate, the body loses prana. Okay, and when you lose prana, whatever you touch, you tend to take prana from it. You tend to absorb prana from it. So the things that you touch will look the same, but they are devoid of prana. So if you are cooking when you menstruate, let me give you a simple example. Let's take a carrot which is freshly harvested and a carrot which has been kept in the cold storage for a week. They both look the same, but the taste is different. Why? One is full of prana, the other is devoid of prana. So when you menstruate, anything you touch, you will absorb the prana into your system that looks the same, but it's devoid of prana. Why are we stressing on eating organic food? Because it has more prana. So this is the reason why women should not cook for others when they menstruate. They can cook for themselves. But when you give food to others, if it is devoid of prana, it is devoid of the essential life-giving material. So understand this. Don't worry about what others are saying. Then you can separate fact from fiction. See, this is what happens. So always let our focus be on the positive aspect of understanding this correctly. The negatives will bring you down. Don't get distracted by it. You focus on understanding the truth. And the truth will make everything else clearer, isn't it?
Absolutely, ma'am. There's one more question actually. The Maryland University, US, with Banaras Hindu University, India, via the United Nations, run a course on dispelling myths and misconceptions regarding menstrual health. It is a much needed course, but there is no reference to Ayurveda in it. So, what is ancient science of menstrual practice here in this lecture? For that course, it is just a myth and an element of suppression by patriarchy. How can the gap between Western education and Indian studies regarding menstrual health be reduced so that everyone is benefited?
So I guess that is, I understand what you're saying because I've worked in the NGO space for around 12 years. And what work I'm doing is completely the opposite of what everybody else in this space has been saying. But this is in line with what our native knowledge systems is. So the only way, as I said before, is that Indian sciences should be part of the curriculum. Just as we teach digestive system, reproductive system, we must also teach Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, right? So just as we tell them about the tissues and all of these layers in the skin, you must teach them about dhatu. Just as we teach them about blood, we must teach them about prana. Unless this is part of the education system, it will always be difficult to explain it. And in our own country, our own people call it pseudoscience. So then what should we expect about those who are outside the country? If our own country is so hesitant in saying and understanding our sciences, then what is to say about others? The change has to begin at home. The change has to begin with us recognizing our native sciences as mainstream for us. It could be alternative for others, but it should be mainstream for us, right? Yes.
Absolutely, ma'am. It was really a wonderful, very informative and eye-opening lecture because we have learned so much new from this, something that we have not come across a lot. The Ayurvedic aspects and the scientific facts behind the practices related to menstruation. So, there are no more questions in the chat box, ma'am. And as the speaker of our next session is also waiting, I think we will have to come to the end of this session. I
Sure.
request
Thank
Ms.
you.
Nidhi Katti to please propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Manali, for giving me this opportunity. First of all, ma'am, I want to say that it was a wonderful lecture, and surely we will read the full book, me and Manali both. And I'm aware that there is a full course in Indic studies, which is being organized by Indus University. I have seen that, and if possible, I'll surely join that. And
Nidhi, your screen is frozen. Nidhi, are you there?
am am I audible, Manali?
Yes, now you are audible.
Okay. Okay, I'll continue then. Yeah, sorry for the interruption. There was some network issue. So, as I was telling, ma'am, you are really working hard on promoting the scientific reasons behind our ancient cultures. As presently, many of our educated girls itself in India are not understanding the value of these ancient cultures. Surely, me and Manali will try our best to promote it. Thank you so much for giving us your valuable time and for giving such a wonderful session. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you for inviting me and all the best for the other workshops. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thanks.
ma'am.
And
So,
I also thank Nandan Shastri sir, Honorary President, and Manali Momaya, President of the History Enthusiasts, for being such a wonderful host. Thank you so much.
thank you, Nidhi. I think it's now time to move on to our next lecture. Our resource person, Dr. Shailaja Patil, is already here, and I will just take a moment to end this live stream and begin the next one.